there, Griff Hamlin here from Blues Guitar Unleashed. Welcome. Thanks for joining me in today's video. And in today's video, we're absolutely stepping from the blues traditional to the more blues-based classic rock thing. And what I really haven't taken a lot of time to talk about, and this is a huge thing in not only classic rock music, which obviously is very blues influenced, but it does come up in blues music as well. And that is the concept of what we call a power chord. So what I'm going to talk about is, of course, how power chords work, how to play them. They're actually pretty easy in general, but there are some really cool things that you can learn from power chords, things like where your notes are, and there's some really cool riffs and stuff. So there's some corollaries that go with power chords that I find really fascinating and kind of cool. So I hope you'll stick around for that. Let's start out with what a power chord is. So if we take I'm going to say a fancy chord, like a G major. It has 3 different notes in it: a root, a fifth, and a third. Every other note is just a double of one of those. And it turns out that it's that third that makes it major or minor. G minor, G major, G minor, G major. If we get rid of all of those and we just have a G, okay, and I'm using my root down here, the G on the 6th string. That's important. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to add on the next string 2 frets up. That's going to be my 5th. I'm going to then, if you can, also I'm going to add my pinky on the 4th string. So now I've got my first finger on the 3rd fret of the 6th string, my 3rd finger on the 5th fret of the 5th string, and my pinky on the 5th fret of the 4th string. And that is what we commonly call a G power chord. Now you might hear it called, sometimes it'll be written in music as G5, okay, or sometimes GR5, which is root 5th, because it doesn't have a third. What's also important about it not having a third, it's not major and it's not minor. Okay, this will work in either situation. So let's say you're playing a song that has a G minor in it, and you have a hard time playing G minor. Well, you could play a G power chord and you could get away with that. It would fit in just fine. Now that is what we call I'll say a root on the 6th string. Okay, now that note is a G, as I mentioned earlier. If I bring it up, it's going to be a G sharp. Now it's an A power chord or an A5. Now it's A sharp or B flat. Now it's B, now it's C, now it's C sharp, now it's D. So you know them all. Right? There's no more you have to know. If I go down, G flat or F sharp, F. Now if I take it all the way down to where I have the open E string, we call that the open E power chord, it doesn't really make sense to use those 2 fingers like that, so I'll probably switch over to my 1st finger. Now keep in mind that I'm using 2 fingers. I can just use this, right? I'm using my 3rd and my 4th finger up here. I'm doubling that root, okay? I don't have to. This can all be done with just the 1st and the 3rd finger. Okay, and if you think about things like, you might be familiar with like, the blues scale. Right, so I'm just playing through the minor blues scale, but making power chords. And probably already you notice that, you recognize that. Okay, that riff right there just comes from taking the minor pentatonic or the minor blues scale, which you very well may be familiar with, and instead of just playing the single notes, play power chords. And you would be amazed how many, now we have root on the 5th string, can also work. Okay, so right now I'm at a B. Now I will tell you one kind of fun little technique thing. When I play a power chord with my root on the 5th string, my 1st finger is actually barely touching the 6th string, in case I accidentally strum it. Now, you can actually push on the lower 6th string, and you'll get kind of a almost moody, dark sound. but the root is still on the 5th string. This type of thing, I know Black Sabbath used to use that periodically, and a lot of more modern hard rock and heavy metal bands use that. It's not as common, but it's something you can do. But what I do, like I said, is I just kind of barely touch that 6th string. And I take them out, okay? Or, in the event I accidentally strum that 6th string, it's gone. Also, in the event I accidentally hit the top 2 strings, my first finger and my pinky are kind of taking care of those for me. So I'm not gonna get any of the notes except the ones I want. That's how I'm able to just strum it. I can strum it nice and hard to get that sound, but I'm not going to get extra notes. So if you're getting extra notes, you're getting open strings. You get stuff like that. That could be a cool sound, but if that's not what you intend, it's all muting, and it can all be done with either the 1st or the 4th or 3rd finger on your left hand. Can take those out. It shouldn't be a problem once you kind of get the hang of it. It's one of those things where you constantly are making adjustments. And again, if I kind of walk through the pentatonic scale, there's a bunch of riffs here that you might have heard. Okay, and this is why a lot of students, when they first learn how to do power chords, learn those types of riffs. They tend to be all over the place. If you're more of a blues player, right, you can get something like that. And it's just 2 power chords, E and D. Now, what I would highly recommend that you do is, this is actually how I learned the names of the notes. Okay, so when I was a kid, my favorite band was Iron Maiden for a time when I was about 15 years old. 12, actually, when I got my first electric guitar. So when I got my first electric guitar, I got a songbook. Back then, there was not tabs for anything. Tab didn't really exist. And this songbook had things written like E5, D5, C5, B5, and this was the chords, and this is what I was supposed to play. And so I could kind of figure out from the chord diagram that was where they intended me to put my fingers. And what I eventually kind of figured out is that, hey, that E5 is the same finger shape as the D5, which is the same finger shape as the C5. So that must mean that all of these chords are this, 5 type of chord. I didn't even know the word power chord back then. But I figured out that means this must be E, this must be D, and this must be C. So when you learn songs, if you pay attention to the fact that, okay, when I have to play an E power chord, my first finger is at the 7th fret of the 5th string, now you know where E is. Okay, you don't have to spend time day after day learning where the notes are. Everybody should know the names of the notes. But this is a super easy way. Let's say you're playing, Smoke on the Water, right? Well, if you see in your sheet that that's a G5, pay attention to the fact that that's a G. And then that's a B flat. And that's a C. And that's also a C. Right, from earlier. So I could play a C 2 different ways. I could play a B flat 2 different ways. And I can play them with all 3 fingers or 2 fingers. And they're very subtly different. And why might I want to only use 2 fingers for stuff like this? Right, so if you know that, what I call a closed blues in E type of thing, you're already comfortable playing that 2-note power chord, but do you always know what note you're on? And you should, okay? And that's the kind of thing. This can be a great tool for learning the names of the notes. And also, like I showed you, for things like cocaine, right? These are just basic things. Now, Smoke on the Water isn't actually played this way, but it makes a good way to get started. Iron Man, right? Okay, but don't learn it 2, 5, 5, 5, 7, 7. That doesn't help you in the long run. That doesn't teach you anything other than where to put your fingers. Learn that that's a B, that that's a D, that that's an E, that this is a G and an F sharp. Because then the next song that you learn that goes E and D and C, okay, well, you know the E and you know the D already. And now you know the C. And before you know it, you've got a half a dozen riffs under your belt and you know all of the names of the notes on the 6th and the 5th string. And that's a huge, huge step in the right direction, okay? So there's a ton of fun to be had with power chords. You can just kind of mess around with them. You can, you know, if you're new to these, so many great riffs, you'll just stumble upon them. Just try stuff out. Just, you know, put them together into a major scale, put them together into a minor pentatonic scale. Just move them around. Just play with them. There's so much great stuff that can come from these. And notice the difference between, you know, like if you happen to know the full bar chords, listen to the difference between, say, a G major and a G power chord. Sometimes you might prefer the power chord, even though something calls for a major chord. If you're using like a lot of overdrive in your tone, you might not like the sound of that. You might just want that instead of that, okay? Overdrive in the tone doesn't always make those big full chords sound great. So anyway, I hope that if you were not super hip to power chords, that you got something out of this video. If you dig it, of course, if you have guitar playing friends, you know, feel free to share it with them. As always, I am Griff Hamlin from Blues Guitar Unleashed, and I will look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.